Alright, this video is to review ideas about the 1920s and also World War I. Unfortunately, I made a mistake and I forgot to record last night's chat, so I'm making a revised edition this morning. So on the agenda, you can see what we're going to do. You can pause at any time, of course. And we began class with the warm-up. So 2 examples of new technology or new culture from the 1920s. The 2 most important technology inventions during this time period would be the mass production of the automobile, particularly of Ford's Model T, but also the radio as well. That's the other really important one. And there's refrigerators, washing machines, electric stoves, the toaster is invented, Band-Aids, Scotch tape, and then new culture. You have the Harlem Renaissance going on, you have the poetry of Langston Hughes, you have jazz and new art movements. You also have the age of the flappers. So you have short dresses that are showing kneecaps. You have new hairstyles, the bob, very, very short cropped hair. And you also have saloons and speakeasies, because remember, Prohibition is in effect, passed under the 18th Amendment. Also, if you want to type in that bit.ly link and pause, there's a short Charlie Chaplin movie. He's an actor, very famous in the 1920s, but he's going to continue all throughout the 1930s and 40s. That one's rather entertaining. Long-term planning, just a couple of reminders. The AP exam is Friday, May 5th at 8 a.m. You're going to be taking it at your base school with the kids who took it, face-to-face class. Just some guidance. You want to keep an ear out for pre-administration of the AP exams. That's when you do all the pre-bubbling of information and names and such for each AP exam. When you do your pre-administration, you want to please make sure that you have one for AP US History. In terms of our class for planning, Era 7 test will be after week 25. We're on week 23, so our test will be coming up in about 2 weeks. I'm still working on getting together a practice AP exam and hearing from the online campus about when we can get that done in terms of AP classes. I do like to host a practice AP exam for you guys right before. And of course, as you hear things about review or AP prep for our class at your base school, please feel free to attend. Go talk to your AP teachers and ask, hey, can I attend, or what's your schedule, or please let me know about any review sessions you might have. It'll be easier to do at your base school, but I'm also curious, do you guys want to do Saturday review sessions or after-school review moving towards the AP exam? Let me know, and I think I'll make a survey real quick and send it out to you shortly about that. Key ideas from World War I and the 1920s. I just want to review a couple things. So World War I will break out in 1914, and originally the United States remains neutral. So you want to think about, well, why does the United States enter the war? What's the number one factor? These are some popular answers. Although I would argue that the Lusitania, which is sunk, it was a British passenger ship that was sunk in 1915. We don't get into the war until 2 years later. So you want to think about time connection as well. Is there really a right answer? No, this is more of an opinion piece, but it's always, of course, how well can you support your argument? What's more important is the increased government involvement in the United States over regulating the economy. And so they created the War Industry Boards, Woodrow Wilson, and that set quotas of companies to produce enough guns and tanks and so forth. And they also controlled access to raw materials. That was led by Bernard Baruch, and we're going to have a similar war industry boards during World War II, because during times of war you need to have a more watchful control or connection between the government and the economy and production. Also, Wilson is concerned about labor. During times of war, we have to meet production because soldiers will die. You do not want to have labor strikes. And so Wilson created the National War Labor Board that helped to mediate labor disputes between the workers and management. And during World War I, workers, industrial workers across the United States actually gained a lot more rights due to the war and the fact that they cannot have a strike. So they finally get better wages. They finally get that 8-hour workday that they've been fighting for ever since the 1850s. And they also get the right to unionize, and nationally, not just by state, not just by industry, but national unions. And also during this time, don't forget, we have the Great Migration. So starting in World War I and going all the way up to World War II, you have the movement of African Americans migrating, moving out of the South and into northern cities to find jobs. And that'll be exacerbated, and during the Great Depression we'll see even more with that. But the Great Migration is a big internal shift in where African Americans predominantly move out of. In terms of shaking public opinion, we have the government creating the Committee on Public Information. And this used patriotism and intimidation to help promote patriotism. And that was led by George Creel. You also have the Espionage and the Sedition Acts. Now, they're actually two different acts. The Espionage Act allowed the government to penalize people, usually with fines, for obstruction of war efforts. So if you passed out leaflets that were against the draft saying don't sign up, and obstructing the war effort, that was the Espionage Act. The Sedition Act allowed the government to imprison Americans who spoke out against the war or against any type of war effort. So if you spoke in front of a factory that produced tanks saying don't go to work because you're just going to help the war effort, you could get put in prison. And also if you criticize the President of the United States or the federal government and their policies. About 1,000 Americans are sentenced to prison under the Espionage and Sedition Acts. Most famously, that will be Eugene V. Debs. Remember, our socialists that we've talked about. And both of these laws are tested in front of the Supreme Court in a famous case called Schneck v. United States, where the Supreme Court ruled that the government does have the authority to limit free speech, which is guaranteed in the First Amendment, when there is a, quote, clear and present danger. So this is the first Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court is allowing for the restriction of some of your civil liberties for the better improvement of the majority, for the whole. That's the most famous example would be you cannot say fire in a crowded theater without actually being a fire. You're just inciting a riot and you can be charged, right? That's somewhat a limit of your free speech. Wilson's plan for peace. You do need to know the 14 points. The most important point would be the creation of the League of Nations, which you see the political cartoon, the dog there. Wilson is rather idealistic in creating the 14 points, and in the Treaty of Versailles, he does get his League of Nations approved, but the United States doesn't end up joining that league. And that is a great synthesis for the creation of the UN, which actually will be done after World War II. 1920s Clash of Cultures. It's really about this reactionary decade in some senses to this previous decade of very dramatic change in a short amount of time. Some adopted this modernity and others reacted against it, and we see a surge of nativism, anti-immigration, and isolationism, and fundamentalism and fundamental Christian beliefs. 1920s presidents, there's two. Out of the two, Calvin Coolidge is more important. Coolidge basically believed in a very, very small government, and he essentially let big business run wild. He cut taxes, and he raised tariffs on foreign goods. That's the Ford-Macomber tariff. He raised it by 50%, which is going to help lead to the Great Depression being a global phenomenon. But Coolidge also vetoed practically every spending bill that the Republicans wanted, and despite the fact that he is a Republican himself. Some historians make the argument that Calvin Coolidge's policies and the lack of enforcement for pretty much any watchdog function of the economy as enforcing antitrust laws makes him more responsible for the Great Depression, or one of the presidents that, including Hoover, made it worse. Last part is immigration restrictions. You do need to know these two acts, not necessarily the numbers, but on what they purposely did. Both the Emergency Quota Act of 1921 and the Immigration Act of 1924 set quotas, or the maximum amount of immigrants that will accept from a nation, based on previous census numbers. So in 1910, 3/4 of the people coming into the United States on blue, you can see on the chart, is Southern and Eastern Europeans. We're going to take 3% of that from each nation. However, that wasn't enough, so in 1924 they passed the Immigration Act, and that set the 2% quota for each country based on the 1890 census. Now that changes it and allows Northern Western Europeans to come in a lot more numbers, right? And it was purposely designed to limit the involvement of the immigration of Southern and Eastern Europeans, right? Because those were the least desirable immigrants coming to the United States. They also banned fully Japanese immigration to the United States as well. The Chinese haven't been banned since the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1883. Okay. I'm going to cover tips and tricks in another DBQ, so thanks for watching and have a good day.